Well, Jackie, thanks so much for being here on Good Energy. We're really excited to have you. Would love to just sort of have an intro of you and Dream.org and what you do there and everything about you.
So first and foremost, I am absolutely thrilled to be here. The energy here, the folks here, the conversations I've had have been absolutely fantastic. I am Jacquelyn Omotalade. I am the Climate Investments Senior Director at Dream.org. Dream.org is this amazing organization based out of Oakland, California. Although a lot of us are remote, the remote lifestyle is what a lot of folks like right now.
Yeah.
So I'm based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And we work on the intersection of a lot of issues. We work on climate. We work with justice impacted folks. We work in climate technology. And we kind of bring those all together to figure out how we can create a more inclusive green economy that works for all of us, not some of us, as previous kind of economic booms have done in the past.
So tell us about sort of your entry point to RE Plus and to SIA and to the solar industry in particular. What brought you here and why are you interested in this work?
Oh yeah, man, like SIA, I almost feel like it speaks for itself. But what brought us into this energy work, and particularly renewable energy work, is that for the last 2+ years, Dream.org has specifically worked on the Inflation Reduction Act, more specifically the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, right? Including like the Justice 40 principle. So in terms of how are we making sure that at least 40% of federal climate funds go to the communities who've been most impacted by pollution. Historically marginalized communities. And that, for the history of Dream, has been what the organization is focused on. How are we uplifting some of the most marginalized communities? And obviously, when you think about like green economy, you think about what this future looks like, and you think about climate activism, you can't speak about that without talking about how are we transitioning out of fossil fuels, out of petrochemicals, and what are we transitioning to? And how are we making sure that the communities that have been most impacted by that aren't left behind? And I mean, I feel like you can't exist in renewable energies without hearing like the name SIA. And so
Love to hear that.
That's great.
And so last year was actually my first year attending the conference in Vegas, and I did it on my own. And after that, I said, no way. Ain't no way I'm doing this by myself.
You need a team.
Yeah, I need a team. And so I think we have 11 team members later and a membership to SIA later. We are here.
Awesome.
We are on the
Wonderful.
ground, and we're having conversations because this is like the biggest conference in North America, right? This is an opportunity just to get in front of a lot of people and have conversations and make sure that as people get excited about, particularly like I'm a finance person, right? So I am super excited about the influx, particularly of public dollars, to help boost up and deploy both like new technologies, but also elevate existing technologies to help us with this transition, and then get into the nitty gritty of like some of like the intricacies of like how do we get it all together. Yesterday I was on a panel for SIA around like grid equity. But I also want to make sure that equity, as we go speed and as we continue to fundraise dollars, that we do not lose a focus on equity and making sure that the most vulnerable communities aren't left behind.
So important. Really appreciate your engagement and bringing your whole crew out here.
Awesome. And they've enjoyed it. And plus, it's just it's a very cool space to learn, right? Like one of the things that I consider myself a lifetime learner. And I love to learn. But what I also love is that my team is very reflective of the communities that we say we want to represent. And so we have the ability to be almost cultural stewards in terms of taking all this information that we digest here and bringing it back to our communities so that when we're in them and when they hear, developers come and they hear about new projects, it is not something that is the first time they're hearing it. They're hearing it from trusted community members.
I'm hoping you can break down for our audience a little bit more how you would like to see other organizations engage with you to create those bridges, eventual partnerships. What would you like that to look like? What would you like to see?
So we are always open and willing to work with like developers, utility companies, anybody who is thinking seriously about like equity, right? And how they are bringing and working with in partnership. Because I never say for, right? I always say in partnership with historically marginalized communities, particularly BIPOC communities, particularly if you're doing workforce development and you're interested in partnering with like justice impacted folks and what are some of the best practices around that. If you are, my team does a lot of financial modeling. So if you're interested in like, I am a developer, I'm interested in doing a lot more solar financing and figuring out like what works and speaks to and with communities of color, historically marginalized communities. Those are conversations that we're always willing to engage with and partner with organizations around. If it is something as simple as like, I need to go into community X and hold a conversation, but I am terrified because I have a horrible history with that community. Right. Which a lot of folks
Yeah,
do.
totally.
And that's honest, right? But like, and you can have come from a place where you might not have had the best relationship. But I mean, if you've ever been like in a marriage, there are some days you hate your partner. right? But like, if you want to stick it out, right, you have to be willing to have very difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And what we consider of ourselves is that as an organization can help you have those difficult conversations with the community so you can work through your issues and concerns. You can come out with a killer community benefits agreement that works for both your organization, your company, but also for communities, and that both feel like they're in a win-win.
That's great. Is the product for some companies that community benefits agreement? Is it partnering with them on their sustainability goals? Like, could you pinpoint any more specificity around the ways that companies should envision walking the talk a little bit more?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of it is coming with like a sense of like humility. I know that we get super excited and super pumped about all like these new like technologies, right? And like
Yeah.
we're rapid fire, like love, and I'm doing my dissertation work around like microgrids and like and artificial intelligence, right? So I love the geek out too, but sometimes that's not what communities are ready to hear just yet.
Right.
And that doesn't mean you can't do that work in communities, but it means there has to be a little bit more work that has to be done to get to a place. And a lot of times when folks think about, oh, I got to do that work, I got to engage with like these communities, right? They don't think about if you actually do the precursor work, it avoids like the lawsuits, right? It avoids like the community protests. It avoids the animosity if like that upfront work is done in terms of let's have like some community meetings, right? Let's figure out like if community have their own community vision, which a lot of communities do, right? Before I come to that community, make sure I completely understand that. Let's understand that community's history, right? Because people aren't the way they are by accident. It is the circumstance of the history of like their lived experience. And what we are exceptional about and with is because that is, for most of us, that is also our lived experience, right? So it is not something foreign to us, right? It's not just this academic endeavor. It is something that we live and breathe every day. And so we are at Dream are just exceptional about helping folks from the quote unquote like outside kind of come in and do the trust building exercise that are necessary to really see something. And so to answer some of your questions, does it involve like understanding like sustainability goals? Does it involve understanding what a community needs, right, in order to support? Like I always have conversations with folks who are doing a lot of solar on roofs, which is really really cool and really cool, right? Like I wouldn't be here if I didn't think it was. But sometimes it involves other conversations, right? In terms of like, well, who. Because there's been a lot of stuff even in solar in terms of exploitation, particularly like in Black and brown communities. So it's like, let's have conversations about that, right? And like what is being done differently so communities have a thorough understanding of that. If it's something as simple as we want to put solar on people's houses, making sure the houses are strong enough, right? And how are we connecting folks to programs that they understand, right? Or even having cultural understandings of what communities' relationships with debt are. When you're asking somebody to do some sort of financing that will cause them to go into some sort of debt, when they have a house that they've bought in 1950 that is paid off, that's a different conversation, right? It's to somebody, who like me lived for 18 years in like the Bay Area and knows that like my $1.2 million condo won't be paid off anytime soon. Right? So asking me to do another 30,000 isn't that much, but like for other people it is, right? And being able to understand those different nuances and being able to have the right folks in the room to have those conversations. And despite how brilliant a lot of us may be in this space, sometimes we aren't the folks to have that conversation with those folks.
Yeah.
And we need to figure out who those right community gatekeepers are. And Dream is phenomenal at doing all that.
Yeah, finding the folks to really start with that engagement with, to broaden out to the broader community. Yeah, that's so important. So you said you were here last year in Vegas, and you're here this year. Have you seen an evolution over that time? Like what kinds of differences are you seeing in some of the conversations you're having? Is there any growth or change in how people are approaching sort of community engagement?
I feel like there's a lot more excitement. I still sense that fear, right? But there's always fear when there's different. I mean, people have fear of discomfort, right? And that is just the reality. But I feel like there's such the speed that folks want to work at and with and do this work, right? There's that energy, and I think with that energy comes the understanding of like I do believe there's a collective understanding that we can't leave different folks behind.
Mhm.
Now, how we solve that, and I will say there's no way to solve it, right? Like there's no one way to solve it, right? There has to be multiple ways to do it, right?
Right.
And so I definitely feel some folks feel like they're stuck. And again, that's why one of the reasons why I say come and reach out to Dream, right? Like, yes, you can, and it's okay to be stuck, right? It's okay to say, I need help. I may be a very smart person. I may have thought of the best technology in the world, but when it comes to having conversations in community, when it comes to like how I am thinking about like equity, when it comes to even understanding the history of the community may have had with my company or a company that predates me, like I may be struggling a little bit, and that's completely okay. Like you should be comfortable in that, but don't let that comfort cause you not to be inactive, right? Like the sign of life is growth. We should always be continuously growing as individuals, and so I'm starting to sense that like people are starting to be pushed. I mean, there's a lot of money out there, especially with greenhouse gas. I mean, $27 billion is coming on the pipeline, which is a great motivator for people, right? But just making sure that people are motivated to do it the right way or the best way possible so that they don't come up against those roadblocks in the future, because that will slow us down. And we know right now that this moment requires speed. And we also know when we are using public dollars that there's a particular level of scrutiny, right? Because these are taxpayer dollars. And so we need to be able to tell the beautiful stories that like warm people's hearts in terms of what renewable energy is doing for folks in rural America, in the purple and the blue states, in the red states, right? Like we need to be able to tell that, but we also need to at some point go back to the federal government and get more money, because this is not $1 billion movement. This is $1 trillion one, right? And we will continue to need the federal government to help to supplement it.
I think I want to spend just one more minute on that. I mean, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is a sort of pivotal element of public policy right now that's I would say, probably most at risk under another administration, under conservative administration. What impact do we have the potential for these positive changes from the IRA and some of the policies that you're advocating for in real life over the course of the next 20 years? What kind of change would you like to see that drive for those communities in real life?
So I can truly speak to real life because I'm from southwestern Pennsylvania. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm 45 minutes from West Virginia. I'm probably another hour from like Ohio, right? So I'm right in like the Rust Belt. I am right in Appalachia. I am part of like the former steel towns that helped build America, right? But also when they shut down, we experienced like the devastation, the economic devastation, but also the impacts of pollution, right? We have some of the worst asthma rates in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the country, and that's directly related to steel, which helped build, some of the middle class as well. And Pittsburghers and who have been there for generations, right, who haven't been a part of the new technology boom, have definitely suffered when as steel production has gone down, like in our region. And so I say, what I envision in a perfect world, and like this in 20 years, right, is for all the folks who helped initially build, who are aging, who helped build that steel and the coal and all those other communities, are not left behind, right? They are trained, retrained. If they are retired, their health care is taken care of, right? Because they definitely suffer the health consequences of the steel industry. And then we have the fracking, which was a topic of conversation yesterday evening in Pennsylvania as well. And I see how my neighbors are experiencing that, some of the rare cancers and other things that community members are suffering on. So if I could re-envision what the world would look like, it would be that, one, those communities are acknowledged, they're represented, their economic interests, because folks forget, right? Like, it is one thing to transition to something, but you have to actually make sure that people who are doing the work, folks who are working, and on the well pads that make up fracking in southwestern Pennsylvania and other communities, when you think about oil and gas and the Gulf region, right, that all those communities are not just industry goes away, right? That is replaced with something, right? And something that they can do what the Constitution says they should do, which is pursue happiness, right? I want to see a place where we think about like health, as you spoke about, right? When we think about, and particularly I'm knowledgeable around like fracking, right? What it does to water, wastewater, it's a big issue, right? So when we think about access to clean water, and in Pennsylvania in particular, where I'm from, our Constitution state constitution gives us the right to clean water and air, right? And I would like to see that reflected in actually how every Pennsylvanian lives. And I would broaden that, across like the United States, right? Like when we think about what do all Americans for the most part want? They want to be happy, they want to be healthy, and they want to raise their families in the ways that they see fit. And that to me doesn't change, right? Like it doesn't change. I think that when we think about like renewable energy should be embracing that in the policies and practices that we like adopt, right? Like when we think about like power outages, right? When we think about like the climate is changing, that is reality. And so when we think about what we need to do around that is both adaptation and mitigation, right? Like, yes, we are. And so when I think about, communities like my own, when I think about like, we're starting to get power outages, and we know it's like we electrify more, unless we do something around the grid, that will also like intensify. So one of the things I'm very passionate about is like, well, how are we thinking about the grid, right? Like, how are we making sure that there are not rolling blackouts? And so when I think about that, I think that we would come together as both like a nation, but also, I believe in like states' rights, and I believe that, in the power of like local government as well, and really think about what that means to our communities and how we embrace that vision, both collectively in our local regions, but also as a nation.
Thank you. That's super helpful. I feel like this is one of the most important conversations the industry should have. And not just from a policy perspective and trying to articulate what the impact of these changes could be, but from a workforce perspective. At SIA, we talk, core to our entire mission is making sure that as this industry grows, that is equitable across all demographics, right? So get your foot in, access to capital, access to workforce training, access to education, make sure that those generational wealth opportunities are available to everybody.
And access to small business opportunities like entrepreneurship. I mean, there should be, I get probably pinged in LinkedIn all the time about, particularly like young folks who have like a brilliant idea of just a little niche, right, that needs to be solved as we work together to build like both this grid and this renewable energy system, right? Just the amount of stuff that's coming around like battery storage, all those things. Like we need those folks, but we also need to make sure we're funding those new ideas, right? And we're making sure that we're funding them in like an equitable way, right? We at Dream always say that those who are closest to the problem are also closest to solutions. So I always say, man, I want to see a bunch of, and hopefully next year I will, a bunch of folks who are from Appalachia and other places, former coal, actually here, right, having conversations about what technologies they are working on. Let's get Jigger Shaw. let's talk to like the DOE, and let's talk about what is like the deployment funds that they need to make sure, prove, right, that their technologies are something that we can be adopted and scaled.
Yeah, love it.
And I appreciate too, you helping people put this into practice and move from words into action, because I think there's a lot of motivation and desire amongst this industry to do the kinds of things that you're talking about, but a lot of folks don't know where to begin. And I think organizations like yours that can help provide those connections, provide that guidance, provide that new way of thinking, and just hold their hands a little bit and guide them along that path, because again, I think the desire is there. It's the tools that are missing, and I think it couldn't be more important for folks like you to be here to help show them that it's not as scary and it's not as hard as they think.
And everybody can't be good at everything, right? Like that's why you need help and you need support. And so, and I always say that, in Dream, part of our ethos is, right, this whole idea of like unlikely allies. So, while other folks may be screaming at, certain folks, certain utility companies, all that stuff, we want to keep that door open. We want to have like those conversations, because it's going to take all of us, right? Even some of the ones who folks don't like that well, like we got to include them, and we got to bring them into like the fold, right? And if you think about it, I mean, and I hate to get like patriotic, but I feel like that is true, like the American way. Like we come together, right? We don't have to agree on everything, right? But I think we could.
We never will.
No,
we never will.
And we shouldn't. That's what makes us great, right? That we have like diversity of opinion and diversity of thought, and we have to be open to being challenged, and we have to be open to be doing things different, right? Yeah. And doesn't mean our whole book of business change, but it means those incremental changes that we make that get us closer to what this collective goal is, which is in the end just protecting ourselves against the changes that we're causing the planet, right? Because I always tell folks the planet's going to be okay. Earth may purge itself of us, but she'll be here.
Yeah,
Right. So in the end is in all of our collective and individual best interests.
Yeah.
To really figure out how we work together, how we partner together to really make sure that we're making it a better place for everyone.
Right. Well, SIA is certainly here to partner with you guys. We're so happy that you're doing the work that you're doing. In the end, it's partially our job to convince our membership that there's not just it's not just the right thing to do in terms of thinking differently about their business models. There's money to be made.
Yes,
too.
absolutely.
So, like, making sure that that partnership is very clear and that there's more to be done in that area. Is there anything that you would say to anybody who's listening about how to engage with your organization if they like what they're hearing right now?
Oh, if you like what you're hearing, you can absolutely just visit our website. My name again is Jacquelyn Omotalade. There is a button that you can reach out to contact me there, and I would absolutely, again, dream.org. And I would love to engage in the conversation. If I'm not the right person with my org, I am happy to connect you to someone else because, again, we are willing to be that sounding board, that thought partner, and to also just roll up our sleeves and kind of get the work done. And we have a footprint all across the United States, so
Well,
and in
wonderful.
multiple languages, too.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Well, Jackie, thank you so much for taking some time. And I hope this is the first of many conversations because, like we said, the work you're doing couldn't be more important. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It was truly a pleasure being here. And thank you for all the work you're doing. We need your advocacy. So thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.